virtual machines. So one of the key components about virtual machine is storage, which is one of the key components. And like you can see the arrows here, we have storage, responsibilities, access, size, availability options, image, name. So I'll leave this up for a few minutes so that I can explain a bit of around it. So when we refer to what a virtual machine is, I don't know, can anybody give me an idea of what they think a virtual machine is? Anybody? You can unmute. Just 1 minute. Okay, so quickly, Azure created this virtual machine. Virtual machines are like you having servers, are like you having CPUs, operating system, on something that is not real. It's not a physical, it doesn't have a physical location, but it is existing like a server. That's just what it is. It's existing like a server, but it doesn't have a physical location. So with virtual machines, you can create what they call instances of virtual machines. So right here, we will start. So Azure, like we all know, is a cloud computing platform, an online portal that enables you to have access and manage cloud services by Microsoft. This is just like a reminder.
Sorry, excuse me. Do you mind putting your slide on slideshow so it's bigger for everybody to see?
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is where this is one of the key learning objectives for today: to administer virtual machines, configure virtual machines, configure virtual machine availability, and then manage virtual machines. We'll also be looking at, so when we talk about the configuration, we will start a practical class. If you have your Azure, if you can log into Azure portal to follow as we start creating a VM. So how to create so that we're fast, because network can mess us up. So we're going to we'll talk about virtual machines. Let me just lay the foundation first. So why or what is one of the key functions of virtual machines? Why do we need virtual machines, and one of the key functions? So the truth is that sometimes Azure virtual machines can be used as the different kinds of ways. So when you want to create, so imagine if you had to work in different locations with different servers, say from Lagos to Kano to Sokoto to Bayelsa, different states of Nigeria, and you needed to ensure that you were able to communicate, share resources amongst all the offices. But you do not have money, or you do not have the structure in place to put in infrastructure. By infrastructure, I mean to put in, well, that's how virtual machines can come into play, because they play the role of having something in one place, but is being managed, having something in one device or one server, but you have different locations. That's what it is. So it's like having, I say, okay, I want to have an Azure virtual machine, and my virtual machine is in Lagos, but I'm able to create a virtual machine for my Kano office, my Lagos office, my Sokoto office, my Bayelsa office, like that. And so the good thing about it is that sometimes when you think of infrastructure, you have to think of RAM size. What is the capacity? So if you have several people in your organization that have to use emails, the RAM size of your email server will be very large. And you know that, and the costs will also be huge. And so to reduce cost of all these things that everything, virtual machines come into play. And the good thing about virtual machines is that sometimes when your data is lost across your data centers or something gets lost, you can use what you can retrieve backup servers because you've created, you can retrieve it because you have the instance, instances, that's what's called instances. So you can create several virtual instances. For example, I have a virtual machine for my Sokoto office. I can say in Sokoto office, I create virtual machine 1 instance, virtual machine 2 instance. So all of them are under, I can put all of them under a region. Or the other one may serve as the other one can serve as a backup tool, as a backup server. So the instances required, and so one of the things that virtual machine does for us is that it makes it effective for us to save RAM memory. So we're able to manage our RAM memory easily. So you can see here, review cloud services responsibilities. The good thing about virtual machine is that it is known, it's like a platform as a service. Platform as a service. I don't know if you've done infrastructure as a service. And you can also use it as an infrastructure as a service. So you see the colors here, the blue, the darker blue. Responsibility always retained by the customer. Responsibility varies by type. Responsibility transfers to cloud provider. So one of the beauties of IaaS or the on-premises, you see the on-premises one, so where my cursor is, the on-premises one, everything is blue because it means that, so what we have here, on-premises, responsibility transfer to cloud provider. You can see everything is blue here, which makes us know that at this point, we call physical data center done by the provider, physical network is done by the provider, physical host is done by the provider, system is done by the provider, is done by the provider, applications is done by the provider, identity and directory infrastructure is done by the provider. So everything on this list here is done by the provider. That's why you have the on-prem premises. The next one is the infrastructure as a service. The only thing that transfers to the cloud provider, the only thing the cloud provider does is to provide physical hosts, physical network, and physical data center. So in such cases, you have a physical server, possibly physical internet connection, and physical computers or a physical desktop or computer connecting one to another. That's what the infrastructure as a service offers you. And when you have responsibility varies, you see responsibility varies by type. Responsibility always retained by the customer. So this part where they say responsibility retained by the customer, let me go again. Responsibility varies by type. Look at responsibilities. Responsibility varies by type. So we have the operating system is handled by the customer under PaaS. So it's the customer that will determine, somebody like you as a network administrator, for example, you determine the operating system, The network controls the applications, the identity and directory infrastructure. So what this means is that you determine the types of applications that you run with your cloud service. You determine the kind of network controls. If you want people to be able to download voice or download news, to not be able to download network controls, you are the one that sets it up. If you want people to use Windows Server or you want them to use Ubuntu, you're the one that sets that up. If you want, then the identity and directory infrastructure is shared between PaaS and SaaS. That's where you say, okay, director will have access to all the servers, or maybe the secretary will have only access to login. But from there, she doesn't have access to see how much people are earning as salary. Or you say, okay, HR has a different account based on their identity and all that. You structure it. So that's what. So platform as a service has that based on their responsibility, varies by type. That's what we mean. Then we have responsibility retained by the customer. So always retained by the customer. So it means that on the other one, the SaaS. So this one stems as the other one is platform. This one is but SaaS we hardly use those ones, but anyway. So this one, systems as a service. So this one, the responsibility lies on the user. Almost everything. So in such cases, you find out that it's like an app. The person just uses the app and logs in, and then is able to perform cloud services or be the cloud engineer. Some of these apps, example, something like Google, our Google Drive. Our Google Drive gives us cloud capabilities. But what we do not do, we do not have access to do some other things like identity, directory infrastructure, applications, network controls, operating systems, and all those things. Because we didn't pay. And sometimes even when you pay, you may not have access to do all. Because you may not have access to do all because some of it, every organization has its own structure and design. So they don't give access to everyone to do everything. It's risky. So plan virtual machines. Well, for us to plan a virtual machine, we have to think about, we start with the network, we start the name of the virtual machine, then we'll choose the location, then we'll consider pricing. Pricing is key. Choose a location. Each region has a different hardware and service capabilities. Local virtual machines as close as possible to your users to ensure compliance and legal obligations. Choose a location. So 70 plus Azure regions available in 140 countries. I'll show you that quickly. So let me just quickly show here. Okay, no, this is where. Okay, so this is it. So first and foremost, the Azure portal. You can go to Azure portal first things first. Azure portal, log in, sign on, and click on create. Azure virtual machine. So now we create a new, or let's use an existing. Okay, so use this resource group. The machine name, virtual machine name. Let's create VM1. Sometimes I use West Europe, even though somebody was saying I should use South Africa North. But let's go for, okay, let me use South Africa North. So the availability zone. So this is where I'll explain. I hope you're listening. So this is where I'll explain a bit. So this is, so you can see we have availability zone, physical physically separates your resources within an Azure region. That's what an availability zone does. Then we have virtual machine scale set. Distribute VMs across zones and fault domains at scale. Then we have availability set. Automatically distribute your VMs across multiple fault domains. Note these words, they are different. Availability zone, virtual machine scale set, then availability sets. And remember that I mentioned earlier that the virtual machine provides you CPU, it provides you memory, hard drives, network devices, and other devices. It gives you access to that. And because of that reason, so look at this here. So let me quickly highlight. Okay, wait, let me pause at this point so that I don't confuse you. Let me take you back a bit to some components. Infrastructure as a service, can actually also be described as a virtual machine, as we saw in that slide I showed earlier. So, and some of these are some of the components that you need to know and note the terms, because when you're creating virtual machines, the terms interplay. So you need to know them and know the terms and what they mean. Container instances, mesh applications, available sets, app services, disks, VM images. So one of the things that the operating system creates connections to remote desktop sessions hosts. Then we have the disk. I hope you know what it like a hard disk. So in Azure Virtual Machine, we have attached hard disks, and these hard disks come in types. That's what you see here. These hard disks come in types. This is an example of what they hard disks. In Azure, we refer to them as image. So we have the VHD image as seen. It's another type. It's a new Azure Virtual Machine. The other one, the disk. When we talk about disk in virtual machine, we're talking about bootable virtual. So page blocks are like used to help you, enable you to recreate a virtual machine without going through the stress of creating several virtual. Imagine if your company has about 1,000 servers, and you need to make updates on these servers, on these virtual machines. Let me just see, on these virtual machines. Will you sit down and start to give command for each virtual machine, copy, paste, notes? By the time you reach 1,000, in order to help yourself and work smart, you use, note these words, you have, okay, note this one, you will have several options. So look at these instance details here. Remember I said that in virtual machines, instances can be found. Instances are found in virtual machine. You can create several instances. You can create several virtual machine instances. So this works like this. So we'll go back again. At least with that explanation, I hope you understand and you have been convinced and not confused that virtual machines are the way to go. So virtual machines, you can see here, okay, so let me go up again. So because of the kind of subscription we're using, Azure Pass Sponsorship, yes, I just created a resource group. There was an existing one, I just used that one. Then the next one, the virtual machine name. Please note this name down, VM01. Then the region, I said South Africa North. Availability zone. I want this virtual machine to be able to have resources within an Azure region. So it would physically separate within an, if I wanted virtual machine scale set, that means I'm saying it should distribute VMs across zones and fault domains at scale. The option has changed. Can you see? It has now said no applicable scale sets in the current resource group and region because I have not created any scale sets. I've not created any skill sets. So sometimes what do skill sets do? There could be failure on a physical server. So what happens is that because it's advisable to deploy instances of the VM. So when there's failure on a physical server, because you have several instances of that VM, you can go and pick one of those VMs, or sorry, those instances, and use. So if there's, for example, if there's an issue with one of the physical server in Sokoto, physically that thing has some mental issues, and then you now say, okay, but work has to continue, and you are trying to think of a solution, and you're trying to ensure that there's no breach in service, your data center is not shut down. Is what they call business recovery. Your ability to sustain the business even when an outage has occurred or an incident has occurred. So one of the things about the availability set is that virtual machines that are placed in an availability set perform identical. Note that word. In an availability set, they perform identical functionalities. So here is what it says: automatically distribute your VMs across multiple fault domains. So I can be in domain A in Lagos, domain B in Kano, domain C in Sokoto. I can decide to enable them in a way that it becomes available across multiple domains. So what it means is that they perform identical functions. Their functions are almost the same, but they may be in different domains. So I'm not bothering about how to configure with IP address, subnetting, how to change the resources, RAM size, security, automatically. For now, let's use the availability zone. Let's see. Let's use zone 1 of the availability zone. Security type. The basic level of security for virtual machines. Then image. Remember I mentioned image is Windows Server 2016 Data Center x64 generation 2. So let me change this. See, this is not supported. Let me go back again. Let me see which of them can we use. Let me go back. It's not supported with this. Okay, so this is where, so the size, this is standard D2, V3, VCM, CPU-S, 8 gig memory. $159 per month. So this is part of where, let me see your sizes. So see the size here, mostly used by Azure users. Type V CPUs, data disk, maximum IOPS, local storage. So this gives you an idea of, let's use the D5 series. Because it says the generation D families with sizes recommended for general purpose needs. This is a general purpose need virtual machine that we're creating. This is taking time to load the price. Okay, let me go down. So this username here, let's use a different username, Textilers. password. Wonderful. I actually like to create passwords with certain things that are common. Okay, so we're not changing this. We'll leave the allow selected RDP. Would you like to use existing Windows Server license? Yes and no. Save up to 49% of your license. So one of the things that virtual machine does is that it enables you to, the cost of licensing sometimes can be a lot for a business, small startup, the cost of licensing. But organizations like my organization at this moment, they are a bit, because of how structured and how large they are, it's very, 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 what's it called? License is key because they don't want to have any issues with police. But here for a small organization, one of the things that virtual machine does is that it saves you the stress of having to deal with licensing, especially in the Nigerians. Helps. Okay, so the next page in creating is disk. Note the word disk. Azure Virtual Machine has one operating system disk and a temporary disk for short-term storage. Sorry, I forgot to mention that when you're talking about virtual machines, we also have three storage disks for virtual machines. Three storage disks for virtual machines. We have the operating system disk, the temporary disk for short-term storage. Let me go back to that. When we're talking about this general purpose balanced CPU to memory ratio. So I'm going to show you I'm looking for that slide. Okay, see it here. So this is what I was just trying to show you. So we have the Azure Virtual Machine on Windows. So we have the C drive, the D drive, the F drive. So note what the functions are. The C drive is for operating system disk. The D drive is a
Sorry, your screen is not showing.
can you see determine virtual machine storage. So it says Azure Virtual Machine has two or more disks. We have the OS, the temporary, the data disk. The data disk, as I said, is optional. Then the operating system and data disk reside in the Azure storage accounts. Note that's where it resides. The operating system, the data disk, they reside. See it here. The operating system and the data disk, they reside in the storage accounts. Where do you find the storage account? So when you open the home page of your Azure portal, you see the place where you see that option, like I showed in the previous practical slides. But we'll go back to it. And then Azure virtual machines use managed disks. They can all be managed. So we have the standard, the premium, or the SSD Ultra. So note this, the data disk reside in Azure storage accounts. The Azure based storage service. We have under the Azure based service, we have the standard, the premium, and the ultra. All these work together to ensure that you have a good virtual machine. So the next one we'll go is this here. Back to our virtual machine now. So we have this here, the VM encryption host is not registered for the selected subscription. so we're not taking it because of the kind of subscription. So the truth is that when you're using virtual machines, you have to also be sensitive of the type of subscription you have. That's why we gave some credits. Titi mentioned, I don't know if some of you have gotten subscription, but are there people here that have subscription? These highlights, show yourselves in the comment section. Is there anybody that has any subscription here? Azure subscription. Nobody has.
I'm using the one that was provided to me.
Okay. Okay. I thought she provided, so it's not everybody. Okay. It's not everybody. Okay, yeah, no, it couldn't go around for. Right? You're using the free one, right?
Yeah, it is free. Yes.
Okay, $6. Okay. Okay. So there are limits when creating a virtual machine. When creating a virtual machine and the subscription, because the free one doesn't allow you to do certain things. It only allows you to just test and see some features, but you can't edit all the features. And sometimes, even when you're trying to edit some other features, the network would not allow you. I don't know. Sometimes there was one we used recently, it had that kind of issue. So this one, the operating system disk size. This is the image default. You can, let's leave it at this. Remember that the disk size is important. The operating system, as we saw in that picture, as we saw in that slide, the OS disk, the data disk, temporary disk. So come back here again. The operating OS disk type. Premium SSD, locally redundant storage. Best for production and performance sensitive workloads. Standard SSD, best for web servers, likely used enterprise applications and dev tests. So best for backup, non-critical and infrequent access. In the case of this class now, which one do you think suits our class amongst these three? Premium SSD, standard SSD, standard HDD. Then we have the zone redundant storage, best for production workloads that needs storage resilience against zone failures. Standard SSD, best for web servers, light used enterprise applications, dev tests, and that need storage resilience. In this case, we'll go for standard SSD. So we have this one here, platform managed key. Don't bother ourselves with this for now. This customer managed key, platform managed key, because it's sort of like gives you passwords. From experience, it creates like a key, security key password for your virtual machine. So you may not really need that now. Okay, I think that's pretty much all that's needed to do here. Okay, we move on to the next one, networking. We're creating a virtual network interface will be created for you. Yes, so this is where that is. So the subnets, public IP will be there. Default subnets will be created automatically. Basic allow selected ports. This will allow all IP addresses to access your virtual machine. This is only recommended for testing. Yes, so because we're testing, it will allow the RDP 3389. Normally, I would use HTTP 80 when I'm doing this, but because for the purpose of just learning, I'll rather just want us to open it and just let everybody. Then the load balancing. Okay, this deletes public IPs, NIC network identification card when the VM is deleted. So if you delete the VM, the network card automatically removes all the data when you delete the VM. So load balancing. So in this one, you can say Azure Load Balancer. The Azure Load Balancer, as the name implies, it supports network traffic, port forwarding, and outbound flow. So, for example, you have what this load balancing does, or load balancer does, is quite interesting because it narrows down to, it's like it says, okay, you are going from Lagos to Abuja. Which road should you take? Should you take Benin Road, or should you take Sokoto Road? So I'm aware that everybody here is not in Nigeria, but I'm just using different locations. Later, and how do I connect like the virtual machines? How do I enable that my virtual machines are able to communicate? So one of the key things is to ensure that you set up what they call Azure Load Balancer. So it allows outbound flows, inbound. So it's like where a post office, letters are sent out of the post office. Letters are also received in the post office. But the road which these letters of a post office, I don't know how many of us remember the years when we had the normal post office. Some countries still have till now. So, but basically what this does is that if for example I'm the writer of a mail, or I'm trying to send out some information to another office, I can decide to send I can decide to forward and say, okay, my letter should pass through a certain road before it gets to the destination. Or I can decide, it's just like when you have, let me see, UPS has what they call the express route. Express means that the method in which they will take your letter, the method they will use is different from the other methods. So if before they were using road to deliver the letter, this time around they're using flight to deliver the letter. So that's what this does. It enables you to be able to balance your resources. So you're not putting too much CPU processes on one virtual machine, and you're not overworking a particular virtual machine to do, or a virtual machine instance to do more than it should do, because you want to make reduce your costs of production to live environment. So this in itself. So you now go to application gateway. This web traffic load balancer for HTTPS URL based routing, web application firewall. So we can put this here. Then we say select a load balancer. No existing load balancers in current subscription and location. So we can create a load balancer. We can say see what it says here. It says details such as subscription can be inherited from the virtual machine that you're creating. A default IP backend pool load balancer will be created on your behalf, though certain configurations can be changed if you desire. So you can say your load balancing name will be textiles. Textiles 2 public. Transport control protocol is taken by this is the method we wanted to use. Which port are we talking about? Port 80. So here it says if a subscription or not, I don't know if anybody can remind me what the Microsoft Entra ID does. You can just unmute your mic and say it. Can tell us, remind us. I bet you've done it. Identity, enable system assigned, managed identity. Can anybody?
Okay, the Entra ID is just to manage management of users, management of devices, management of groups in the whole organization, the whole tenant.
Okay, yeah. So it enables you to understand. It's like what we have as it's still the same thing as identity management, but it's the form of it's my office will say is work order. So you need to have a work order number so that your work can be tracked and what you do is. So what you have done is the email does not support login with Microsoft Entra ID, yes, because we are using a sponsorship subscription. It doesn't support such because usually many times for some of these IDs you like the Microsoft Entra ID, it usually works with pay as you go. I don't know if you heard of pay as you go. It's another part of Azure where you put in some dollars, work with dollars, right? So put in some dollars and as you create virtual machines, you have a wider scope to play around with certain features of the virtual machine. So for example, if I want this virtual machine to be like the web to manage my website, then I create another virtual machine to manage security controls. Then I create another virtual machine to say, okay, this will manage the records of staff, the payroll, salaries of staff, and everything that has to do with HR. And and so in many organizations, they create virtual machines for many departments. So they say, okay, this virtual machine is for the HR department, this virtual machine is for the IT department, this virtual machine is for the control security department, this virtual machine is for the business unit of the office and stuff like that. So in doing that, many times in using those IDs, so the good thing about the Entra ID is that enables you to narrow down. You can use one Entra ID to create multiple virtual machines under it. So, but it usually works with pay as you go. So this one, monitoring, we really don't need to set up anything here for now. Enable recommended alerts, enable my storage account, and this would enable you to with custom storage account. So if you want your storage account to be customized, for example, if I want to say, okay, I want my virtual machine to store only 8 gig. Each virtual machine should only have a size of 8 gig. Or I want it to be able to store, or maybe a backup. It may be a backup virtual machine. You say, okay, I want it to have only 8 gig. So that's what this can do. You can set it up there. So, okay, this is pretty much, yeah, so we have, yes, we have done this the user data, the host groups, capacity reservations, placement group. Let me run through because some of this cannot work on this subscription right now because of the amount on this, the amount on the subscription. Because usually on virtual machines, you pay as you go. So it's more like the more you use, the more you pay. The more you use, the more you pay. That's how it is in their own case. It does not allow the poor to breathe. That's okay. So this tags here, let me look this here. Let's just review and create. So if we're to create tags, okay, that will take me out of this whatever of this class right now. But I just want to set up this first. Let me see it. So we'll wait a bit for this virtual machine to be created. So when it's created, it will show up under virtual machines from the home page. So we go back to the home page and show up there. We pick out the IP address. Let's copy it. Go to our button. So this is it will open up the remote desktop connection, right? On this here. Let me put the IP address with that here. And I click connect. So the username and the password is what we created before. Can somebody remind me what I said the username was? But I know the password. Oh, this network today is. I hope it opens up. So what we're trying to do now is we're connecting to a web server from the virtual machine. We created a virtual machine and we're putting connecting to a web server where we can now do the server manager. That's what I created now. Yeah. Too many passwords in my head that I guess I must have. I thought I showed. Okay. I don't remember. I can't remember what I used. Let me try this one. But this is what I used. This class. Did I add any other thing? And I didn't know. What I used. Credentials did not work. Okay. Let me paste that. Okay, so this is wow, something is wrong with it. Oh Lord, I hope I did not myself here. And I didn't even write it down. I just figured that it's something. I hope I didn't type something wrong somewhere. The credentials. Well, okay. So let me not waste time on this because I might have to go back and edit some of the credentials again on the virtual machine. But this is how far we've created a virtual machine. But let me just quickly show you what it will look like, or what it's supposed to look like when it logs in from this place. When it logs in from this place, this is what you're supposed to get. You are supposed to get this.
Sorry, I'm still seeing the Azure portal from my side. I don't know if I'm supposed to be.
Yes. Don't worry. Give me a minute. I'll show you.
All right. Cool.
So this is where.
Congratulations, you have deployed and connected to a Windows Server virtual machine in Azure.
So
This task is now complete. Click anywhere to continue.
So this is what you're supposed to have, right? Can you see the screen? So it's come up like a Windows server like this. And at this point, this is where you now start setting up your server.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Okay.
It looks like since you forgot your password, why are you not doing the reset process?
Yeah, so because, okay, let me go and do the reset process. Because I just thought it would take time, and the way it was doing, like it was
Okay.
network, that's why. Well, let me go back and it sometimes can do that, take time. So let me just go so I'll complete the entire thing. The reason is also because on some cases from experience, I discovered that sometimes when you change the credentials, the VM machine starts to give you errors. You get you start to get error messages afterwards because it's almost like you've distorted not because it can't work normally, but because we're using a sort of free what's it called feature, but when it's page, you can change.
Yeah, I understand.
Hello?
I understand. I understand, but I just expected you to maybe troubleshoot first. And if there's an error, then we can use the click-through one.
I don't know if VM01 I used. It's even the username I'm not certain. Yeah, it was VM01. Then
Did you say the username was Textilers?
okay. I didn't write it. That's a mistake. I should have
Yeah,
written
okay.
I think it was textiles. So here we go. Can you see my screen?
You're still sharing the click-through lab. If you can switch to...
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay. It has not been. Okay. Let me see. Welcome to the server manager. On this server manager now, we have a virtual machine we have created. So this works, funny enough, this is a very sensitive area but this is something that I use regularly. And so what this does, so if I want users on our server, for example, I want to add their roles, their features. So okay, this part is phased out because we're using a free. Okay. So the next one, install type is role based, server selection. You can select the server from the server pool, select the virtual hard disk. This is where we'll select. Usually I'd have downloaded. So I'm in a class out. Sorry, usually I would have downloaded the virtual machine and stored on my laptop space. My hard disk is a bit okay. So let me just explain what this does. This enables you to add roles and features. So you go next, role-based and feature-based installation. So this works such that, okay, for example, if I want people in accounting department get to see. So this is what happens here. You can set this role-based or feature-based installation. So what it means is you can install roles and features on a running physical computer or virtual machine. Configure a single server by adding roles, role services, and features. So I'll create a server group name. Let's say our server group name is Textilers again. Textilers again. Okay. let me put it as textiles. You can see textiles practice here now. It has become a server now. So this server name, I could now decide some of the other things I want on it. There's a part where you can add the features you want on your server, just as we have here. This is local server. So we come to manageability. We say, okay, I want it to be accessible on several servers, Kerberos authentication error. All these are set based on what specific functions you want to achieve. So let me do it this way. Okay, so I'm saying let everything go to the local server. Okay, I want to move all these things to textiles practice. This is the file storage, this is the server manageability. Wow. Well, what's going on? Yeah. Sorry. I need to go see. Okay, let me just quickly run through this. Okay, so this is the Active Directory. The Active Directory gives you a place where you could add your domains, access the domain controller. Your computer can both join to your domain, enable access to the domain controller. So Titi said she had taught you about the Active Directory domain services before. I will not. So so here we could add, there should be options here. So what happens is like you say, okay, if you want this virtual machine to have this feature, like maybe file servers, to have an Active Directory, to have this function to this function, that's, you add it here, you put it here. But this is not letting me do this now. I'm coming. There's something I skipped. It's been a while I used this free, or rather this subscription, this type of subscription. There's something else, so add here. So I've added it now. The virtual machine, I've added it to this. I've added the server now. Okay. Then to show up there, I added it to the textiles. So I've added the virtual machine on the textiles practice, the server I've created. With this now, this comes to the end of what we'll teach at this part, because I need to move on to the other parts of app service plan and then PaaS, Azure App Service plans and fixed sizes. Even though I've kind of brushed through them before in the earlier parts of when I was creating the virtual machine. But it's part of what we're supposed to take in this class. Let me just minimize. I'll go back. So here now, you see under textiles practice, the new server we created, we've been able to implement that virtual machine VM1 on this. So you see performance, available memory. It's supposed to tell us the available memory, CPU usage, and all the likes here. You can play around with this. It's much around like adding what you like, choosing the options you like on the server manager. Let me get this one. So you see manage, you add roles and features. I'm gonna write this. Okay, let me skip this paper. Okay, so now under the server roles, I want to make the server like a server that performs the function of main services. It carries, that means they carry a particular IP group system that you want to keep on reserve. Then the different, but let me use web server. Web server, add features. So I wanted to add the features of a web server to this virtual machine. So automatically I'm making the virtual machine like a web server. Instead of me having to go and install and pay money to own a web server, buy AC, buy fan, buy everything to keep the server room cool and keep it in good condition, and manage the CPU, the RAM, and all that, we can work with a virtual machine and achieve all that. That's the beauty. So here I can now say, okay, features, .NET Framework 3.5. I always like to use the .NET Framework 3.5, but sometimes again, I'm looking for other containers. The tab region, sorry, I may not have time to describe all these terms, because if I'm to sit down to describe all these terms, we're not going to close today, we'll be here. But some of them, okay, yeah, sometimes we use SN, like for, let me just explain, okay, software load balancer, that gives you an opportunity to have a software that does the load balancing. Telnet client gives you an idea, you can use the IP address and you can find, log into the device, log into, like, for some of things I use in my office right now, I use Telnet client to log into certain devices, check their IP address, check what is going on the ports of those switches or those routers, see what is happening on them, and then I can troubleshoot from there. And sometimes I check the port status. I can check certain things. Then you see the Windows PowerShell, the Windows Defender features, activation service, backup, Windows Server backup. It's important to also have that in place, because sometimes if a VMware starts misbehaving, maybe somebody comes and tampers, or maybe you start, or you run a shift job where somebody else comes into the server room and the person is not aware of some of the changes you made on the server or some of the things that you did on the server. You may need to always have, it's important to always have a backup. I always advise people to always have a server backup. So see, these are some things, since wireless LAN service, XPS viewer, this is a whole lot. Remote assistance, we want the server to have remote assistance such that people can log in from remote places or far places from where you are. For example, people in other countries can log in. You can also access the server. So, with these few points in mind, I hope you have understood and not been confused. And you can still practice a whole lot more, because I believe that this class is supposed to be like a Kickstarter to doing a whole lot, because if we are to delve deeply into some of these things, there will be no time at all. The whole day would have to go for that. And the essence of the cohorts is to give you knowledge and sufficient to kickstart and to move to greater things. So go from here. Okay, so let me just even see. You see what this says here? It says containers provide services and tools to create and manage Windows Server containers and their resources. Let's go to data center bridging. This is even self-explanatory. Data center bridging. So I am part of people that manages the data center right now, and so what I noticed that is a suite of IE standards that's used to enhance Ethernet local area network by providing hardware-based bandwidth guarantees transport reliability. So it's also a form of, you can also use it like a form of load balancing with DCB to help enforce bandwidth allocation on a network adapter. So when we talk about bandwidth allocation, it's key. You don't want to have a server that's why sometimes you see you go to some environment to use network or internet and the bandwidth is misbehaving. It logs you out at certain times, it does certain features. So sometimes network administrators have to sit down to enforce the right bandwidth allocation and also enforce load balancing, that the server is not carrying more than it can take. It's just like your phones. A perfect example. Sometimes your phones will start telling you stuff like memory full, or it starts slowing down, or it starts misbehaving. Sometimes it's as a result of sometimes the load balancing. Maybe there are too many videos, so many pictures that are pulling at it compared to what it should take. Sometimes that can slow down the device, slow down your server too. So that's pretty much that for now. I will go back to, let me go back to this part. So you see here, this part here where Microsoft is saying that they are shifting from this technology in the next few months, 31st August 2024. However, it's still good to learn about it and know, because from my experience with Microsoft, I noticed that if they make changes, the changes are not so much. So if you know how to use version 1, version 2 might not be a problem. If you know how to use version 2, version 1 may not be, just maybe some slight differences here and there. So yeah, that's basically what they do. So for service, I don't know how many here have been private to app service. Although I still feel like I should just explain these parts again. Skill sets. These are the key things you need to understand when you're talking about virtual machines. The skill sets. I don't know if somebody can write this down somewhere, but skill sets. It's like a personal note that I feel like it would help in understanding virtual machines, Azure virtual machines, skill sets, availability sets, Azure load balancer. Azure load balancer. So the first one, skill sets. Let me just quickly just do a recap of this part so that in future when you see it, you know and you understand it better. Skill sets, like we did when we're creating the virtual machine, if you can remember, there was a part where there was available skill sets. It lets you create and manage a group of load balanced virtual machines. So when we say load balanced virtual machines, that's what skill sets do. So let's go back to Azure Load Balancer. The Azure Load Balancer is about availability zones and skill sets. It distributes traffic between multiple virtual machines. So what the load balancer does, the Azure Load Balancer does, and I'll quickly show you where it is. It's on the start button, the Azure Load Testing. It's a fully managed load testing service that enables developers and testers to generate high-scale load and reveals actionable insights into app performance, scalability, and capacity. Very easy, because it just tells you that, okay, if you want your app to perform this way, if you want it to scale this way, the capacity that it can take. So do well to read some more about it. And but in the lab for this class, let me go over to the lab. It's more of creating a virtual machine and connecting it to the web. That's what the lab is about. Very easy. I bet you enjoy it and create several virtual machines afterwards. So, okay, let's go to app services. So we have app services here. So let's quickly run through this. It's better we run through this from here. Host a web application with Azure App Service. Because sometimes you can have a programming language. I remember I used to code with I used to do a lot of JavaScript, and I used to do so I realized that there were certain things on the infrastructure of my former company that did not allow us to be that was restricting our app a whole lot. And for security reasons too, we couldn't make the app couldn't work in a certain way because the infrastructure was limited. We built it's like you building something to handle 1,000 people, and the infrastructure you have can only handle 500 people. So sometimes these are some of the issues we need to consider. So learn how to create a website through the hosted web app platform in Azure App Service. So some people have asked me, oh, how come Azure never has something to do with the website? I'm interested in development of websites and all that. Yeah, so here's an option for you. You can create a website through the hosted web app platform in Azure App Service. So we'll quickly run through all this is also part of, okay, so we say deploy a website to Azure with Azure Apps. So this is quite simple, and so say we set up the development environment. Visual Studio is more popular. I believe Visual Studio, yeah. Visual Studio is the applications like this. I have Visual Studio on this system, but let me look somewhere. So we will do this. Okay, so this is what we do. Visual Studio downloads. I will go there to put in the Azure. I have one Visual Studio on this system. Let me see if it will show up. Okay, it's not. So we'll go to the visualstudio.microsoft.com and download here. Okay, you can see it's downloading on my system. I'm just trying to show us how we can use Azure with app service. Remember, with the app service. And knowing that different app services have their different types of app services. So we create a web app with this, at least it allows us to do this. The web app, okay, let's put it as testing. Let's give it a name. Web app textiles. So you can see here. Okay, if they say it's not available, so we have to find a suitable name. Somebody give me a name. Tech girls. Okay, let me see. Tech girls available. Or tech. Tech G's. Okay, Tech G's is available. So it will be techgs.azurewebsites.net. No, this techgs Azure. So while we go back to the Visual Studio, let me see. It should be okay. No, should I download it? Continue. Visual Studio installer. Continue. Okay. Sorry, this class is not as interesting as I want it to be, but sometimes when we do practical stuff like this, we just have to get. Okay. The installer is about to get down. Okay. So as easy as it is, can you see my screen? ASP.NET and web development tool. I used to use a lot of all this, and I still do. HTML from JavaScript, Cortinas, Docker Station. But for this class, we're using an Azure development. So that is it. And I see install. So you can see what this would install on my system. The NetFrame 4.8 development tools. So I don't know how many of you here are into coding, but what I know is that for you to develop an app, you need containers, you need a framework. But you see, Azure has made it possible for you to find the right framework. Because sometimes when you're developing an app, you may not know, you have to go and start. Like one time I remember we did an app and the NPM install was not giving us what we wanted. Apparently the framework for Ruby was not, we didn't understand the exact framework that worked with the code that we had created at that time. It was later on, after research and practice and dropping and trying, to discover. But this makes it easy. See what it says here: .NET Framework Development Tools, ASP.NET, and Container Development Tools. So it has made your work easy. You are not going to be coding day and night, morning and noon, because this has enabled your good success. Install. So we have Visual Studio Community 2022 download installation. It's about to happen. So when this installs, it will show us some of the code. Okay, no, it will show some of the packages that we can put in and see through Azure. Let's wait for it. While we wait for that, let's quickly go over to the creating of the web app. So you can achieve something. So quickly created a web app, name TechG's, publish. So we go to container, we select container, container because that's where, like, that's like the framework we have for the framework. Windows, let's see if the region supports it. This region was, we used South Africa, North, West Africa. So this part here, this part, is usually where it can also be tricky, because you see this memory here, 16 gig, CPU 2, 8 gig. So you need to also be sure that the kind of app you are running, if there's space, if you don't have enough space to run, or you know how to economize space. For me, I prefer to use an 8 gig, but let's just use 16 gig for this scenario. Then, okay, the app service plan to be a zone redundant, and this, so I would say, so note this one, you cannot make an app service plan zone redundant after it has been deployed. So it says your app service plan and the apps in it will not be zone redundant. The minimum app service plan instance count will be 1. So what this means is that for every time that the app is used, it's in the zone, there will be a counting that happens, pay as you go, depending on the type of thing. So this one, I like to use this Azure Cache for Redis. It boosts app performance. Why is it not clicking? I like to use this second option. Okay, I think the subscription doesn't allow us to use this. Okay, well, we can still play around it. I used to use normally Azure Cache for Redis for the app's performance. So this is where you say the image source. Remember, we talked about the image. What do we say the image is in Azure? It has to do with what exactly? Can anybody remember? Image. So image has to do storage in Azure. It has to do with like what they call the virtual hard disk. So that's where your app service plans can be created in 3 sizes. Okay, there we're not yet there. Okay. So this, okay, let's just leave it at quick start. Windows container and app service, yes. We'll leave it here. Yeah, so the image and tag, yes. Next. Okay, on enable public access on, yes. Next thoughts. So this is just pretty click through. It's quite simple, and the application insights. Okay, let's put it. Let's just put the application. Let it tell us what is happening to applications. That's the insights. Hope you know insights is like your analytics. It tells you what is ongoing for time, like that. Then next, okay, so we have this validating. So we have a web app, TechGIS, container, published in a container with, so let me see the Azure. So what this is saying is that the authentication for this app, so you know what we talk about authentication, the security, the HTTPS, yeah, all this stuff. So the security authentication is not enabled because of the kind of thing we're doing. It doesn't mean that you can't do something. So is this taking some time? Still booting development process. Let me go back to the Visual Studio Installer. Still installing. Okay. Okay, so we have our app service. Thank you. So go back to the home. Oh, that's not what I wanted to go. App services. Okay. This is our app service. So here we go. You can see it now. techgs.azurewebsites.net. Says your web app is live, but we do not have your content yet. If you've already deployed, it could take up to 5 minutes for your content to show up. So come back soon. So when we talk about the content, because we didn't put in much content in the container, so use the deployment center to enter to publish your code. So it's because my Visual Studio has not come up, I can't put in the code supporting. I will most likely use the Node.net. I'll use .net because yeah, most likely use .net for this to work. But let me go back. Let me see if that has come up. Oh, it's taking too much time. Okay. I think for now, this is the web app container is running and waiting for content. So this is what it will look like. So if it was a web app, we'll just what we'll see is maybe the app, what the app is about, the code will carry what the app is about. Maybe if it's a health or business app like Flutterwave or whatever, this is how it will start. At least we have launched the web app using the Microsoft Azure App Service. I hope it is clear. To comprehend, do you understand? Okay, so you see this app service plan here. It is it shows us that ASP.NET is the type of plan that is being used. That's sorry, the type of language being used. So you know, app service plan enables you. You're not thinking of how to code, which programming language, which framework to use, how to merge them, maybe, and then you're not thinking of which would work better for this and size, CPU. Sometimes when you're coding and you have to think of the size of the app, how the speed of the app and all those things can be mentally draining. But here is see the operating system is Windows. The work, more than half of the work has been done here using the app service. So you see the domains, default domain, custom domain. So I can see this time around, I don't know if I have this to do it here. Okay, it's not allowing me to do it here. I have to change a lot of. And then look at these features here: manage deleted apps, manage view, refresh, export to CSV, open query. So this is where some things can be done. So usually I would have, if this thing had opened up, I'll download, export to CSV. That's how I like to. And then I'll copy it and I'll add it in the Azure Visual Studio. Oh, am I downloading more than? My system is already slowing down by this installation. Okay, because I wanted this to be much of a bypass. So, okay, so we are more than half done. Completed majorly most of what we need to for today. Let me look over our. So from what we could see, we connected to our virtual machine using RDP. And then so you see here, the remote protocol, remote desktop protocol. That was how we connected to our virtual machine. So if you remember, while we were connecting to our virtual machine, there was a box that came up and it says remote desktop. So that was the method. But you can use the Azure Bastion. You can use to connect to your, you can also use the SSH to connect. The SSH is for Linux based. The remote desktop is for Windows. The Bastion is not really used now because it seems to be phasing out. So that's why I didn't bother going through that. So in determining our virtual machine sizing, these are the standards. So sometimes when we're talking about virtual machine sizing, I know how mentally draining it can be. Because sometimes you are trying to think of a general purpose, so you have to make sure that the CPU is, the capacity of the CPU is commensurate to the memory ratio. Then when you talk about compute optimized, that means compute optimized. What they're actually referring to here is that you have a high CPU. That means the speed at which it's going, the virtual machine works is fast compared to the memory size. That's what it can store. That's the memory ratio. And the memory optimized means that your virtual machine can have a large space for storage, but it may not be moving fast. It may not have a high speed. Then when you talk about storage optimized, we're talking about the fact that the high disk throughput and the input output. So there's no delay. There's no delay. When we talk about throughput, the cable is able to pass and store information. Doesn't hang across the way when it's transmitting. You know, when we talk about communication and in tech, we usually refer to you saying, it's like somebody saying hi, and the other person responding hello. Then the other one saying, hello, have you heard me? What's your name? And the other one is saying, oh, my name is Anne. And the other one is saying, but if somebody's saying hello, and the other one is hearing, what's your name? There's no communication. Or someone saying hello, and the other part is hearing, are you a thief? And or somebody saying, hi, I'm Gladys, and the other person is seeing or hearing, oh, I mean, I'm here to find you. I'm going to find you, a threatening message. So sometimes there are scenarios that we need to ensure that communication, when we're talking about sizing, that there is no throughput. The information is passed as it is. There's no miscommunication that what you're saying is not what is being heard, or what you're saying is what is being heard. Because I know how many times people say things, and then I don't know if you had that friend that where you say something to the person and the person is hearing another thing. It happens to us as human beings a lot. So basically, it's important when you're dealing with sizing to ensure that you also consider that although this has a lot to do with cabling, more of that information can pass through. Then the GPU, specialized virtual machines targeted for heavy graphic rendering and video editing. This is like what people in the gaming world use. They have to consider when they're creating virtual machines, they have to think of the kind that would carry graphics, high ones, high video editing graphics. Then high performance computer, fastest, most powerful CPU virtual machines. It's fast, it's powerful, and it's so just a recap of the class. Okay. Connect to virtual machines. So we use the RDP. It accepts the traffic on this port 3389. If you remember when I selected the option RDP, when we're creating the virtual machine, it showed the port numbers 3389. And I said I usually like to use port 80, but for the case of this class, and because we're using the kind of account we're using, I had to do it that way. So create. Okay, this thing is opening now. This is the administrator connect to Linux virtual machines. Okay, so this part of the sandbox, because it's really phased out now. It's an additional, a sandbox is an additional hands-on experience. But it also comes with the installation. Sometimes the configuration languages are quite, let me see, skip that in this class. Okay, so we've done this virtual machine availability. So we plan for maintenance, downtime. Okay, let me just quickly explain some of these things. We created skill sets, compare vertical to horizontal scaling, review availability zones, update and fault domains. Okay, there's some parts here that I think I skipped, but let me just go over them while we're creating the virtual machine. I talked about them, but let me just highlight them for the sake of those that. So what this part does here, the plan for maintenance and downtime. When we talk about this thing, it's what we're referring to here is the fact that you create a backup server, create a backup, and you see that option where let me see if I can take it back to that part and go. Server roles next. I don't want to install .NET framework. Okay, Windows Server. So you see, it's quite easy here. It says Windows Server Backup is not installed on this computer. To install Windows Server Backup, you add the roles and features to the wizard to select the Windows Server. So let me go back. So in cases of planning for maintenance and downtime, that's why a virtual machine can carry several instances, can carry like 2 instances or 3. So when we mean instances, it means that one virtual machine is carrying one instance 1, instance 2, instance 3. Instance 1 can be used as a form of web service and all those kind of things, web development. Instance 2 can be used as a virtual machine that carries maybe traffic and or files, highly sensitive files or storage. Instance 3 can be used for, say, roles, identity, Active Directory, Entra ID and all the likes. Because when we talk about the Microsoft Entra ID, it's more like we're talking about the Active Directory in normal. Yeah, it works in the same. So instance 1, file server, a web. Instance 2, file storage. Instance 3, identity. So these three, so when we're planning for maintenance and downtime, these three, they are not in the same category. But what we can do is to move instance 1, 2, and 3 and put them, all these three, on another VM. And when we set it on another VM, all these three instances, we set it on another VM, we store it there as a backup. It becomes, so that's a mitigation plan for downtime. When there is a downtime, when I mean downtime, outages occur. Sometimes lights, power. In the last few days, I know people, organizations, even us too, have experienced it at work, and it was very terrible. A whole lot of power downtime. But we're grateful that we have what we call business continuity plan, where we have backup virtual machines that we can power up when there is a downtime. Then you can set up availability sets. The availability sets. So when I go back again, we talk about availability sets. It's a logical grouping of virtual machines that allows Azure to understand how your application is built. I think somebody needs to write this down here. Availability sets is a logical grouping of virtual machines that allows Azure to understand how your application is built, to provide redundancy and availability. Redundancy and availability. So that when something happens, you can have availability. You can still have what you want when something happens. So note these ones. It's important that you note them, how to set up availability sets, like we did before when we're setting up the virtual machine, a grouping of virtual machines that allows Azure to understand how your application is built. So for example, like I gave the example of 3 instances. Say, okay, this one is for web, the other one is for security, the other one is for storage. So the availability set helps you to understand, is a logical grouping. It groups your virtual machine based on the function. That's what the availability set does. Then the load balancer, like I said, is distributes traffic between virtual machines. So if you have 3 virtual machines, if you remember when I said earlier in the class, and I said you have a virtual machine in Sokoto, in Lagos, in Kano, in Bayelsa. So what this does is that it distributes traffic between virtual machines. Then we have the availability zone, which separates your zone based on the Azure region. And you know, the availability zone separates your physically separates yours based on the Azure region. Your Azure region, as we stated, like I chose, who remembers when I chose the part where I chose South Africa North? That is a zone. And I said, okay, I choose zone 1 of South Africa North. I could choose zone 2, zone 3. If I have money and I see that, oh, okay, this zone 2 has more features that I want for my virtual machine. So then compare vertical to horizontal scaling. We're dealing with how to align and arrange your virtual machines here. Then create scale sets. Remember, I said skill sets are what you create, is used to create and manage a group of load balanced virtual machines. And I said the Azure Load Balancer is an availability zone. It distributes traffic between multiple virtual machines. The load balancer distributes traffic amongst virtual machines. Then the skill sets manages a group of load balanced virtual machines. So that's virtual machines scaling. I showed you that we had where we chose the CPU RAM size. That's part of scaling. And when you're doing app service uses like three service plans, 3 sizes. One V CPU, which is like 3.5 gig RAM. The second one is 2 CPVU, 7 gig RAM. The fourth one is 14 gig RAM. Remember, there was one I used 16 gig RAM for the scaling, the skill sets. That was one of the skill sets I used. And there was the option of the 8 gig RAM, but I used the 16 gig RAM for the web app I created. So the lab classes, the lab will be sent to your mailbox